I think let's get started. 2 minutes past 6. Let's get started. So good evening, everyone. We're here for the Waverley Be a Councillor event. I'm Virginia Ponton from the Local Government Association. Thank you all for joining. We're really glad to have you here today. I run the National Be a Councillor campaign, and I work really closely with councils on events like these. By complete chance, I used to work at Waverley as well, and I loved living in the area, so I'm really pleased to be here this evening. And I'm here to lead us through a really interesting session, as you'll see from the agenda on the screen. We'll start also by setting some house rules. We are recording the session, that's so that anyone who can't attend this evening can view it afterwards. Please let us know. You can do this in the Q&A or by email afterwards. If you don't want any of your contributions shared in that recording, we can edit it afterwards. The recording doesn't share the chat and conversation in that panel on the side of your screen, so don't worry about that. That won't be included anyway. So our house rules are: please keep your microphones muted unless you are asked to unmute. Please raise your hand or post questions in the Q&A function, and of course please be respectful and allow others to speak. The first thing we want to do is make sure you all feel really comfortable about engaging in the session and asking questions. And I'll say at the start, there's no silly questions, so please do ask. We're going to do a quick icebreaker to get the conversation started. I know that's not always everyone's favourite thing to do, so I promise it's just one quick question, and we have got that on the screen for you. We'd like you to think about what you think are some of the attributes that make a good councillor. So you might even think about, if you were a councillor, what would make you good at the role? And you can put that in the, I guess, the question and answer function rather than the chat function. You can write that down if you'd like to. Click on the button at the bottom of your screen, or you can be brave and raise your hand and we will come to you and see what you think. I also have a slide afterwards to share, so if we need some ideas, we can have a look at that together. I'm just going to give everyone a couple of minutes to have a think. I can't see anyone posting anything at the moment, so I'm just going to assume everyone's very hard thinking. Oh, agree. We've got someone. Thank you so much. An advocate for the people. Brilliant. Thank you. And we'll be talking, obviously, tonight about the councillor role, so we'll go through all of what it means really in practice. I think let's go to the slide because, oh, yep, someone else, someone who's interested in helping people. Yes, absolutely. Brilliant, thank you. I've got a couple of things up here for us to think about. These are the, please keep posting your responses as well, because you might have different things or want to share your contribution. We'd really love to see that still. So we've got some of the most commonly given answers to this question on the screen: understanding the community, lived experience of issues, listening, understanding, being open-minded is really important, and those kind of ethical things about hardworking, honest, accountable, really important. I'm sure we'll all agree. So thank you for that. I hope this, as a first question, starts getting you thinking about the skills and experiences that you would bring to the role too. So one misconception about being a councillor is that people do tend to think you need particular qualifications or certain experience, but the great thing is you don't. We need everyone represented from our communities, and we need that diversity of life experience and skills. So anyone can be a councillor, and the vast majority of people are eligible to stand, and Waverley colleagues will help on that later. We'll hear from one of our colleagues on those kind of electoral processes, and you can ask people afterwards about eligibility. So thank you for having a think about that first question. I'm really pleased now to introduce Tom Horwood, who is the Joint Chief Executive, to talk about the vision, strategic priorities for Waverley. So as Joint Chief Executive for Guildford Borough Council and Waverley Borough Council, Tom leads the management team and is responsible for ensuring that both of these public authorities act properly and ensure that equitable quality services are delivered to everyone and within a tight financial framework. As the Joint Chief Executive, he's also responsible for advising councillors on how the organisations should be resourced to achieve their aims and deliver the strategies set by councillors. Tom is also the statutory head of paid service. Thank you, Tom.
Well, thank you, Virginia. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you everybody for joining us this evening. It's really great that you're with us, you're spending some time with us, and that you're thinking about taking this step about becoming a councillor. So really, I've just got a few minutes to say a little bit about how about the strategy of the council, but also I'd quite like to just touch on some of what my job means and the relationships that officers have with councillors. And really, I suppose, just from my point of view, I've been in local government for 20 years. I've worked for a few councils, and I've always enjoyed working for the democratic part of public services. There's quite a lot of public services that, of course, are not run by a local democratic body, but local councils are, and that's because they're often the parts of local public services that the most impact on neighbourhoods and communities. And it's always been a privilege to work with councillors of all different backgrounds and different political groups and independents who really care about their local community and who display some of the things that you've been putting in the Q&A chat and some of the things that Virginia was just talking about. So really, my job is to lead the employees, the 430 employees at Waverley Borough Council, to directly deliver services and also to support councillors in setting direction. And that really then comes to the strategy here. And I won't go through this slide. You can see for yourself the summary of the strategy that the full council set a couple of years ago. And really, I suppose that's where you come in, because if you're a councillor, this is the sort of thing that you will be doing. You'll be setting direction, setting strategy for the local area and for the council to achieve things for the local area. And that's such an important thing to do. And councillors do that through the corporate strategy. They do it through the local plan as well. They do it through a whole set of policies and decisions that councillors take. So one of the key things that councillors do is really set policy and direction for the whole of the organisation for the forthcoming period of time. And of course, agree budgets to do that too. And it's my job and the job of my colleagues to really find how we can do that, how we can deliver the councillors' vision, the councillors' mandate for the local place. As Virginia indicated, there are a lot of constraints on that. It's not always easy. And I'm sure some of that will come up in the conversations that we'll have this evening. So really, the interplay is that the officers will advise and will find out how to do things. The councillors will debate and set direction, will decide those big policies and strategies, and we will work together as one team then to try and deliver those. And I do see councillors as officers being distinct and different parts of a single team. And that goes for all councillors, whether they're whichever party they're part of, whether they're part of the administration or not. It's so important that the democratic debates happen, but that ultimately what we're all trying to do is do the best for the borough, for local residents. So councillors represent the community to the council. They also represent the council to the community. And we do a great deal as a borough council. You'll be aware that we cover planning and refuse collection, leisure, environmental health, benefits. They're some of the big ones. But actually, if you drew up a list of all the services that we provide, it would run into well over 100 different services that we provide for local people that actually make a huge difference for neighbourhoods. So really, I hope that this whole session this evening will whet your appetite and you'll want to find out more, that we'll have a really good session this evening. We've also got an in-person session on the 10th of February as well. You're welcome to come along to that. And also to get in touch with us in the meantime as you're thinking about whether you want to be part of this. And I look forward to meeting some of you this evening and to potentially working with some of you in the years to come. So that's really all I wanted to say as an introduction, Virginia, and I really want to thank councillors for joining us this evening as well, especially councillors from other councils as well. It's so great that you're with us and that we can hear your experiences as well. That's such a really useful and valuable experiences that people locally can hear from as well. So thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm clearly going to hang around and hopefully chip into some of the conversation a bit later on, and feel free to ask me any questions in the chat function or in the Q&A function or live online. And and I'll participate in that way as well. Virginia, I hope that's okay.
Thank you so much, Tom. That's absolutely brilliant. We're looking forward to a really great evening. So thanks, everybody. I'm now going to take us quickly through what the role is about, and then we'll hear from our first two councillors. So as Tom has mentioned, the role of a councillor is to serve and represent everyone, and that's everyone in the ward that they're elected to, and not just those who elected for them. It's a very varied, highly fulfilling role, and no day is the same, as I'm sure we'll hear from our councillors later. So councillors serve and represent the community. They do that in many ways. So talking to constituents, that's to hear people's views, concerns and ideas and really understand local issues. That can happen by phone or email, letter, social media or in person. Responding to queries and issues from local people. So that includes investigating concerns and helping with solutions. That's actually called casework in the council. Keeping the community informed about local issues and events. For example, you may know councillors who do newsletters or social media and keep people in touch in person. Reading council meeting agendas and reports, they're really important, getting all of that research and evidence to understand the issues and be able to participate in discussions and decisions. Councillors do therefore attend formal council meetings, as well as meetings with local partners and organisations in the community. It's not all about formal meetings, although these are very important. Being a councillor really is all about being rooted in the community. So councillors do work collaboratively with local people, voluntary and community organisations, police, health partners, businesses, and this is all to shape the future of the local area. This includes building really strong relationships and encouraging people to get involved and share their ideas and views. That's really important for councillors to do too. Some councillors have extra responsibilities, for example, specific council projects to work on or positions in the cabinet. And lastly, as Tom said already, councillors do shape the future of the local area by making plans and taking decisions. So that's another key role, as well as serving and representing. And councillors adhere to protocols and behaviour standards. Every council has their own constitution and code of conduct, and you can find that on their website. We also have the 7 principles of public life, which are ethical standards that everyone working in the public sector are expected to adhere to. So that includes all of us on the call and councillors, officers as well. I'm really pleased now to move on to hear the councillors who are going to bring all of that to life and tell us exactly what that means really in practice. So I'm pleased to introduce Councillor Sarah Rouse and Councillor Damien Greenhalgh. Sarah was elected as an independent councillor in 2015 and managed the election campaign for the independent group that year, which saw them become the largest opposition group on the council, working with the Green Party. She became group leader and was also until last year the leader of the council in a no overall control situation. I promise we won't be too jargony in the session, but we'll talk about what that means. Sarah therefore has experience of being both in opposition and in administration. Sarah has been involved in transforming how Malvern Hills District Council deals with biodiversity and ecology. Her district saw the worst flooding in decades at the start of 2020, followed by the COVID crisis, and her leadership has driven the council through both of those emergencies. Sarah was actually nominated as a local hero for her work during the COVID crisis. Sarah's passionate about talking to people, understanding people, and working to enable everyone to engage. She focuses on coaching and supporting new councillors as well, and is always questioning why things are done the way they are and challenging the status quo. So great to have you here. Thank you, Sarah. We work closely with Sarah and Damien at the LGA, the Local Government Association, where I work. And Councillor Damien Greenhalgh was first elected as a councillor in his hometown of Glossop in 2013. Aged 25, he was the youngest county councillor to be elected to Derbyshire County Council at the time. Since 2015, Damien has also been a borough councillor and is currently deputy leader of High Peak Borough with a portfolio around regeneration, tourism and leisure. Damien also sits on the Local Government Association's People and Places Board, and outside politics, after a career working in the local voluntary community and social enterprise organisation, he now works for NHS England in the voluntary partnership team as a project manager. Damien has been a trustee, volunteer, director and active member of a number of local charities, school governing bodies and community groups. So thank you both so much for being with us. We're going to do a bit of a question and answer panel, and there'll be time for the audience to ask questions afterwards as well. So we're really looking forward to this. I'm going to start with the question of what made you want to become a councillor. And Sarah, I'll go to you first, please, and then I'll ask Damien the same question.
Great, thank you. It's a question that everyone always asks, and then, you know, and I kind of think, oh, how did I ever get here? How did I end up leader of the council? So I think, I mean, you know, I'm talking to people who are thinking about being a councillor. I was a cleaner. I looked after old people. That's what I still do, because that's what I love. And it was all about planning applications. So I think that's something that gets people going. There's usually some sort of thing in your community, something you're passionate about, something that irritates you, someone who annoys you, and you get involved, you get engaged. And this was a planning application by the then leader of the district council, who put it in on his own land in our village, which kind of annoyed everyone. And I still remember the four of us sitting around a table who were working against this planning application. We were like, well, someone's got to stand. Which one of us is it going to be? Well, okay, you can do it, Sarah. And then I got elected, and it seemed like a really good idea at the time. And then you're sitting there thinking, oh, hang on a minute. I've been elected. So it was a bit of I thought it through, and I did want to bring change, and I did want to get involved. But I don't think overthrowing the leader of the council was quite in my plan, and suddenly becoming leader of an opposition group and all of that in one go. But I've loved it. I've had an amazing time, and I kind of like, whenever I speak to anyone, whenever I talk to anyone can do this. It actually, you know, is quite okay. And I'm sure lovely Damien in a minute will probably say something similar. Every councillor tends to have a story, and it's usually about because they're passionate about something, because something got them going. And I think the one thing that worried me at the time was public speaking, and I maybe we'll come to that later, because that was the one terrifying thing that I suddenly realised I now had to do. So it's quite a simple story of how I got here, but it does involve private eye and getting the leader of the council in Rotten Boroughs and all sorts of exciting and fun things on the way. So that's how I'm here. It was a planning application.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I just love hearing the stories of how everyone got involved, because it's, yeah, often similarities, but very different a lot of the time too. Damien, can I ask you as well, what made you want to become a councillor?
I've got nothing as bang as that as a Sarah story. That I think mine was that I've always been interested in politics. It was something that probably I even in primary school, I think I wrote a poem that it was published in a book around politics. So I can't remember off the top of my head, but dig it out. So I was something aware of politicians and some of the things they can do. But really, it was in secondary school. I had this fantastic teacher called Kath Holton, who really, I did social science, and it was really the potential that politics at every level and the pitfalls, that she really woke that up for me. She was fantastic at engaging you anyway, but we learned as time went on at the school that she herself had been a councillor. She was actually the mayor of my borough when on the year of my birth. That's why I always remember it. And actually, I do credit her with awakening me. And when I say power politics, it really was everything from sorting that thing out for your neighbour all the way up to building that new hospital, or, you know, so from the real small things to the big things. I think when I did join a political party and start to be more active locally in things that were going on in the town, all my friends really saw it as the natural progression. Really, because they always joked about me, for instance, being the tourism board for my hometown of Glossop. I've always loved it. I've always wanted to do things, get involved in things, really. I'm not probably one of those people that likes to be a bystander if I can help. And I think really, in all, whether you're in a community group or taking that to that next step of being in a councillor, I think really what it is about not being a bystander. It's about helping your community, helping people you know. And I do think that's the big difference with local politics to what you see on the TV is they're your neighbours. They're the people that are in the, you know, the post office queue with you. They're the people that you're going shopping with. And again, we'll probably touch on this later, but as we have in local government, we have some fantastic officers, but many, given the geography, and I'm sure Waverley is no exception, you'll have officers that are doing fantastic things, but don't know the very peculiar things about your ward or that street, or actually whether it's roads, whether it's, you know, where something's a bin's placed. People that live there know best, and really when you can help people articulate that to a council and make sure that things are what people want, really, it gives me a real good feeling, and I want to keep catching that feeling and doing more things to help people, really.
Thank you so much, both of you. You've encouraged us straight away. I hope the rest of the audience feels that way too. Sarah, can I next ask how you managed to balance the councillor work with everything else in life? And in local government, we are quite open about the challenges. There are challenges. So what kind of things are you dealing with as well?
I think my answer to that would probably be badly. How did I manage my things? But I've had a lot of different roles. So as my ward councillor, so when you're just working with your local issues and you're, you know, maybe on a couple of committees and you're not leading a group, you're not leader of the council, you haven't got a portfolio, then the work levels then are manageable. You have to read your committee reports, and you tend to get a lot of people catching you in the street, or certainly I do, want to talk about dog poo or potholes or hedges or whatever it is, your local thing. But to manage that workload, that was fine. That I could do that because it was what I was passionate about, and I think Damon will say the same. When you're passionate and you care, you'll fit it in. So on a ward level councillor, that was fine. When I then stepped up to being leader of the council and I had a full-time job and I was doing a course, that's when I'd say, oh, got a bit out of hand. And what I had to do was really prioritise and think, what is the important thing here? And it was COVID, and we had a director left, and it was really, I can remember thinking, I'm not quite sure how I can fit 70 hours work into a week. But it was about prioritising and making sure you still do something for you, because if you don't, then that's when you start losing track of everything. So I think I can't say I was brilliant at it. And actually it was quite funny because I did do an LGA timekeeping course about how other people should do timekeeping. And I was sitting there thinking, I'm not sure I'm the right person for this. But actually perhaps I was, because I was able to be honest and go, I'm really not very good at this. I answer emails all day and all night. I get up in the morning and I do all these things I shouldn't. So I think my advice would be, at the start, it will feel overwhelming, because you don't know how to prioritize things. You don't know which is the important things that you've got to do now, and you don't know which thing you could just ignore for a week and it won't matter. But once you've learned how the system works, once you've learned, and actually it's about 12 months, so you'll have 12 months of trying to figure out everything, and then all of a sudden it becomes crystal clear and you know what you're doing. So I think understanding that and giving yourself that time to figure it out, even understanding what the code of conduct is and how that works, and notices emotion in meetings. What on earth is all of that about? And it all seems foreign, but 12 months in and you're like, yeah, I've got this. Totally. And Damien's probably much more organised than me.
Let's find out. Damien, please tell us. Thank you, Sarah.
I think I'd echo lots of those things. So obviously I've been a councillor 10 years, and I think when I first got elected, I did go straight into having a portfolio role. And that was a bit, so first of all, to be a councillor, and it was in the county council around children's services and children's centres and youth. So it was a bit like, whoa. And actually at that time I did, after a period, give up work and focus on that, and the allowances at the county were such that was something I was able to do, and I think at that time that was the right decision. But later on and now I do actually work full-time alongside my current roles, and there's a lot of learning around I think techniques and managing expectations, and most of that is your own. I think when you go in, I think you understand, in a role where you're passionate about it, you want to do everything everywhere now. And I suppose what it is actually that some things won't happen straight away, some things that you do need to prioritize, and there are so many things that you that can wait that day. So for instance, a simple technique I have is with my emails to manage other people's expectation is I will typically say it may take me up to 10 working days to come back, but if it's urgent, here's my telephone number, ring me. So that's something that I've learned over the years to manage that. But in terms of being a working councillor as well, is I had really fantastic employers with the charity and now with the NHS who are really flexible. And I think probably more than ever, as a result of the COVID pandemic, there is more flexible working. So whether your commitment is children or your grandchildren or work, I would say councils, a bit like workplaces, have changed to reflect that. The fact that we're on this virtual call, whereas in the past this would have been in a drafty village hall potentially, is an indication. So that does help. The need to not physically travel a lot has helped a lot with juggling things. But like Sarah said, it's almost like there's a building block. I think as a ward councillor, well, with everything with a councillor, there's a minimum, but everything else then is around you, what your choice is, whether you want to be that community champion and just focus on your ward, along with maybe the odd committee that you may go on to, whether you're in the administration, you're an executive and you can get your teeth stuck into some policy, or whether you're a non-executive, you're an opposition councillor and scrutiny is the outlet for some of your ideas and how you want to. With all of those, there's a lot of personal choice as to how much you want to be involved or not. And again, I would say councillors and the LGA is brilliant at this, and it's non-partisan. It's whether you have a party or none, it's around that shared experience and little techniques and things. And there's so much great training out there. So in terms of, there are challenges, we're not going to hide them, but again, they're all surmountable. There's plenty of people that do it. I mean, there are days it's your enthusiasm and your other things that are getting you through, like any role, but there's so many days where it's absolutely a delight to be a councillor, and you just got to remember them and lock them in for the days where you might be dealing with maybe some very unhappy people about a particular issue, and actually there might not be many solutions, and you might have to be the person just saying, I don't actually think there's a solution. But for every day there is one of those. There's so many positive ones, and I suppose that's the thing you remember, particularly when you're balancing things in your personal life as well. Just one last thing, just my other half. I actually have only been with my partner since I've been a councillor, so they've never known me not be a councillor, but definitely coping with when you're out shopping and people wanting to have a chat with you and stuff. Again, there's lots of little tips and tricks there again. So that's the beauty of being a councillor and living where your role is. It's about that really. So but you wouldn't be probably here if you didn't care about Waverley and you didn't care about your particular town and village. So yeah.
Thank you so much to both of you. They're really valuable experiences for us all to hear this evening, and also lots of advice you've given in that as well, which is very, very helpful. And the next question I'll pose Sarah and then Damien again is, what can you achieve as a councillor? So if you could share some examples of your achievements and what you're most proud of, I think that's going to really help bring it to life for us as well.
Well, given I got elected to stop a planning application, that one didn't actually go that well because it got approved. But it was that got me involved, and kind of thinking, I mean, Damien, for 10 years, my proudest achievement, the first thing I ever did was to get a brewery. I got involved in getting a brewery through the planning committee and getting it approved. And I'm probably going there on Friday, and there'll be about 100 people in a chicken shed in the middle of a rural area, all having a drink. Huge community feel about it now. And it's kind of things like that's a little thing that I'm really proud of. We had a speeding campaign in my own village, and we got all the kids together and we spent hours making scarecrows and we put them up around the village. And that got in all the papers, and it was, again, a huge amount of fun. So there's those things you do that are really community based, and those are kind of really are passionate about, and that's what you get involved in. And then I think it's that stepping stone again, isn't it? And then you're on your kind of strategy and policy. And I spent a lot of time working on biodiversity, on ecology, and changed how at Malvern Hills we do that. You know, it's now a priority. We have an ecologist. It's, you know, that's something I'm passionate about. And we've even, you know, I even got to speak at a national event about what we're doing in Malvern. And you kind of think, how did I get here? You know, you really are, it's different from changing lives locally to changing things nationally. And then I've got to do amazing things. Damien mentioned the training courses. And actually, the reason we know each other is because we went on an LGA leadership course. And that was an amazing experience, because you learn so much about yourself, but about other people across the country. And because I was leader of the council, which I think was probably my greatest privilege, because I still think, you know, I've been leader of a council. That's amazing. Don't know how I did that. Wow. But that, you know, we got there, and I grew a group of 5 to 20 and took over a council. And because I did that, I got all these opportunities to talk to other people. But one of my greatest things, I think, was I actually got to do a parliamentary select committee on the environment bill. So I've been on Parliament TV talking about the environment bill. And then that afternoon, I went back to cleaning. So it was sort of, it's those amazing experiences that I would never have got if I hadn't got elected. I wouldn't have done all of those things. So I definitely have kind of 3 layers of achievement, the little things that mean the most, which is probably breweries and scarecrows and community campaigns and, you know, that kind of stuff, to being quoted in a parliamentary select committee report. So I you know, that's what excites me about being a councillor. You never know what you're going to do next.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And actually, I think that's one of the misconceptions, is people don't realise that you have a lot of impact in the local area, but also on wider kind of societal issues, right up to national, even international issues sometimes, actually. So that's fantastic. Thank you. And Damien, same to you. We'd love to hear your achievements and what you're proud of.
I think it's similar again to Sarah in that there's a whole range of things, from the littlest things. So some really small examples are, you've a certain footpath that people have always walked on that's been paved, and I know it's such a small thing, but every time you see it, it's that little, yes, I got that to happen. It's so much easier for people, and there's so many of those little ones like that are around the town. And another example, like, again, not the sexiest thing, bollards. There's a real particular issue outside a co-op with people parking on the pavements. No one could get through, and we managed, after a problem that had been there for years, we managed to find a solution, and I was hand-holding officers to come up with that solution. And every time I see it, I honestly probably look like demented to other people, but I'm there just smirking in the street, because it really is just some of those little things really do. But there's obviously a number of bigger ones, and I've had roles that have been borough-wide and county-wide, but I genuinely always come back to my hometown. I think a bit like Blackpool Rock or Brighton Rock, if you cut me, it'd probably say Glossop through the middle of me. So I think my biggest achievements are around, because that's why I went into politics. That's what I want to do. This town and the people here, my family, my friends, is the thing that motivates me in everything that I do. So some big things around a brand new secondary school. That was a £23 million school. Fantastic. Something that the town needed for such a long time. And I know, well, it took a lot of personal and political willpower to make that happen, but that's the thing, working with colleagues, working with other people, that's what we're able to achieve. So that's something I go past, and I know that for my entire lifetime, hopefully a long lifetime, it will be there and it'll be pristine. And again, seeing the kids and the community facilities there, because it's got sports facilities, it's got theatre facilities, music facilities that are all being used, something far better than was ever there before. And that's that thing, and particularly if you're there with, you know, you maybe do have children in the area, maybe you've got grandkids, it's like that's something that's really going to benefit them. So when you see it and you think that, if not but for, it really does hit home. But there's lots of those things. There's bigger things. There's some, when I was first elected, there was period, like there has been a local government, of difficult choices and austerity. So there has been things, sometimes it's not necessarily what happened, but the way you did it. So I know during my time with working in youth services and Sure Starts, there was reduction. That did mean people's jobs were potentially affected. And one of the proudest things was, probably one of the personally hardest, was to stand in a room with 143 members of staff telling them that they may be at risk of redundancy. But the way to have at the end of that process, then I'm getting a goosebumps saying it. At the end of that process, to have where there was no compulsory redundancies, everyone was found a role within the council, and to have people compliment you on something that's probably one of the most stressful things that's going to happen in their life or within that decade or so, to come and say the way that was done, the way that you did it was really appreciated. So I think there's a whole lot of different levels of achievement you could take, and it just depends on your role, and it depends on the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning or makes you put your name on that ballot paper. But the one last thing I'll say is, my dad is a solicitor in this town, and for most of my life it was, are you Peter's son? And I knew the thing that had changed when I became a councillor, when people started asking him, are you Damien's dad? So that's the thing I always remind him of. So there can be little things like that as well, and wind your father up as well. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Many benefits on different levels. That's really inspiring from both of you. Thank you. And I think that really does help us understand what you do on a day-to-day basis and the impact that you can have as a councillor. We'd love to open for questions and answers now for Damien and Sarah before we move on with the rest of the agenda. So if anyone's got any questions, I've got one here already that's already been posted, so I shall read that out while everyone else has a think about some more questions. We'll answer these quite quickly, please, Damien and Sarah, because then we've got lots of time for anything else that people would like to raise. So you can ask your questions in the chat or Q&A, or raise your hand and we'll come to you. This question is, who were you able to turn to for support when things got tense? We've heard a bit about some of the examples already, but we'd love to hear what you think. Sarah, I'll come back to you, please.
Definitely the LGA independent group. So the local government association, every political group, or if you're an independent, has people there that can support you, so you can get peer support. So that's quite a good way. But it's usually your friends and people you've met. And you know, and I used to message Damien because I've met him on a leadership course. So actually you meet lots of people. So you kind of need the councillors that you can talk to, but then you also need other people who are not councillors, because council world is a bit weird. So you need to be able to kind of, just people around you. But definitely the LGA supported me.
Thank you very much. And actually, after Shaylee's session in a bit, we'll talk about some of the support and get some slides up on that so people can really see what that looks like laid out. And Damien, who for you has it been?
I think it is probably, depending on the thing, colleagues or officers, because there are many really experienced officers that have been there before for councillors, that know how they personally deal with things, depending what the issue is. And obviously I benefited from being part of a political group on the council, and there are others, councillors there with different experiences, longer experiences, some new to it, but may have dealt with that in their work or personal life. So that, again, I suppose it's the same for anything in your life. It will be using that network of people you have around you. But I would say as a councillor, there are a lot more formal things there, as was mentioned, that, you know, you've got the national LGA structures, there's lots of guides online about how to deal with common things, but equally, depending if you're a political party or none, there are associations of Labour councillors, Lib Dem councillors, you know, the independent group on the LGA. So there is a lot of things out there. And actually, with the advent of social media and other things, there's quite a lot of sort of Facebook groups and other things on particular issues, on particular things. And really, that will just grow like a snowball of people you can speak to. And having people immediately outside the area sometimes help to get an objective view on something when everyone else, like I say, is in the middle of something.
Thank you so much to you both. And I can see there's another question in the Q&A that I think is probably better if someone from Waverley answers, which Tom is doing an excellent job of typing away there. So thank you. And we can pick that up later potentially too. So if there's any other questions, please let me know. But yes, I'll be sharing some of the support. And as Damien and Sarah beautifully exemplify here, is you get a lot of support from councillors, even if you're not in the same council and even if you're not from the same political world. Damien's Labour, Sarah is independent, and a lot of the courses, most of them actually, that we run at the local government association, the LGA are cross-party, and people find those so valuable. It's really kind of inspiring to see, actually, and we'll talk about that a bit later. I can't see any other questions, and you two have answered in such great detail that I think we can probably move on, because that's been really thorough, helping us understand everything. I'm going to hand over to Shaylee Gibb now, who's going to talk about the electoral nomination process. I know Shaylee, actually, in fact, all of us have had a bit of a technical issue today. So Shaylee's having some very colourful technical issues on her background, in case you wonder. But Shaylee, I'll hand over to you, please.
Great, thank you. So I'm really sorry if I start flashing green or I just start jumping around. My camera's not working properly today. So actually, if someone lets me know if it is jumping around, then I'll just turn my camera off and speak instead, because I know it's quite flashy. So so thank you so much. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to follow the discussion that we've just heard, because my section is probably somewhat less glamorous, but the election process is how you would manage to be a councillor, and obviously the first step is getting your name on that ballot paper and going through the formal electoral process. So on the slide, it's probably just flashed up, but it's disappeared now. There were my contact details and also the details for my team as well. So if you have any questions after this about the election process, please contact me or the team on the details that are on the screen now. So the first thing that I'll talk about is something that we quite regularly get asked about, and that's can someone stand for election, or what do you need to be to stand for election? And we quite often hear that people think that you need some kind of academic qualifications or a certain level of experience to be a councillor, but that's not the case at all. To stand for election, there are some basic requirements that you need to meet. The first of that is that you need to be at least 18 years old. And also that you need to be a British Commonwealth citizen or a citizen of any member state of the EU. And also there are 4 qualifications that you must meet at least one of. So you don't have to meet all of them, you have to meet at least one of them, even though you may be eligible to meet all of them. So if you go on to the next slide. So here's the qualifications. So the first one is that you're a registered local government elector in that area, or in the council area. So that means you have to live within Waverley, not necessarily within the ward that you're planning on standing in, but you've got to live within Waverley. Then there's also the second qualification is that you have occupied as an owner or tenant any land or premises. So that's if you live or you own property within the area, so within Waverley, for the whole of the 12 months before the day you had your nomination is signed, and also the day of the election. Just checking, yeah, slides been changed. The third qualification is that your main or only place of work for the year prior to the day of your nomination and the day of the election is within the area. And the fourth qualification is that you've lived in the local authority area for the 12 months before the day of the nomination and the day of the election. So this is mainly targeted at borough, potential borough councillors. If you're planning to stand for a parish, as a parish councillor, they're very similar qualifications, but there are some slight differences. So for example, instead of saying that you have to live within the parish area, you have to live within 3 miles of the boundary of the parish area. But largely they're very similar. But again, if you have any queries, please feel free to contact us about that. So there are also some disqualifications that mean that you wouldn't be eligible to stand for election. I've listed them on these slides, but I'll go through them very, very quickly. So the first is that you're employed by the council, and that includes places that the council kind of outsources work to as well. So for example, if you're standing for the Surrey County Council and you're a teacher employed by the council, you wouldn't be eligible to stand for election in that area. If you hold a politically restricted post, you're subject to a bankruptcy order, D isn't relevant to us here at Waverley. You've been sentenced to a term of imprisonment for 3 months or more, or you've been disqualified under the Representation of the People Act. And the final one is a new one that was introduced last year, that is you're subject to a Sexual Offences Act. You've been convicted under that. So I've gone through them all very quickly, but we do quite regularly get asked about whether people can stand or not. And the Electoral Commission has some really good guidance on their website. I haven't included the link in this slide, but the Electoral Commission's website has a source of information that is really, really useful. And there's a section under candidates and agents that's really useful and is like the holy grail of the information that you need as a candidate or agent. So it's a really, really good place to go and look for information. So specifically for this year's elections coming up, I've popped some key dates on the next the next 2 slides. So first of all, we're planning on, we'll be publishing the notice of election on the 23rd of March, and candidates and agents can submit their nomination papers from the following day, so from the 24th of March through until the 4 p.m. on the 4th of April. The deadline for withdrawing of candidates and appointing election agents is also 4 o'clock on the 4th of April. So some of this, sometimes we get asked who is the election agent. The election agent is the person that's responsible for the management of your campaign and the financial management of your campaign as well. I'm aware that sometimes in elections there's some jargon, so hopefully I've cut down on the different things that might be a bit confusing, but if you aren't sure, please do put a comment in the Q&As and we'll come back, we'll address that at the end of this. So the deadline for nominations and withdrawals is 4 p.m. on the 4th of April. On the 5th of April, we publish the statement of persons nominated. So that's when you can see who else is standing for election across the borough, or if you're looking at parishes and town councils, who's standing for those ones. The next kind of key dates are mainly around electors. So there's the deadline for registering to vote, which is the 17th of April, postal votes, which is the following day at 5 o'clock, and proxy votes, which is 5 o'clock on the 25th. There are quite a few changes to the elections this year. I won't go into them in too much detail, but there's an introduction of a range of measures at polling stations this year that you might see in the media based around voter ID, but the main important information is still the same in terms of candidates and agents. So these key dates will stay the same. And then the key date that everyone will be looking forward to would be the day of election, day of poll, which is the 4th of May. The King's coronation has made the counting of the votes slightly more tricky this year, but we're counting the votes on Friday for borough elections and Sunday for the parish elections. And that's when obviously you'll find out whether you've been elected or not. So I'm very aware I've gone through that all very quickly, but that's it from me. And this is probably the most boring section of the presentation tonight, because it's kind of factual about how to stand, and the exciting bit is once you've been elected and why you want to stand. But if you have any more information, please don't hesitate to contact me or the team on the contact details on the first slide. And also I'm happy to answer any questions that have been, if any have been typed into the Q&A as well. Hopefully I didn't jump or flash in that. Am I still not green?
No, actually, it worked. The tech was well behaved. So thank you so much for that. Not the most boring thing at all. We haven't got any boring things on this agenda, and it's certainly not yourself. And it's great to know that you've got such a friendly election team and democratic services team at Waverley. Very approachable. You can go and ask them anything, and like you say, Shaylee, people do have lots of questions about whether they're eligible, what it all means. There's lots of detail on the Electoral Commission's website, but it is a lot to read, and we're all here to help you unpick what that all means and help you stand for election. So thank you so much, that's brilliant. Next, we're going to talk about the support that is on offer. Very helpfully, Damien and Sarah have given us so much detail on this already. I don't think you'll have to listen to my voice very much on this section, which I'm very pleased about. So yes, we do have a lot of help out there for you. Waverley has lots of support. That includes this evening, all the information that you're getting this evening, all the contacts you now have for everyone who's working at Waverley. You can ask them questions now in the chat and the Q&A, or after the event. And then once you are elected, you have a whole range of support available, resources, training. At the LGA, we have lots of things that are available nationally. You can access most of these now, in fact. So if you're really interested in finding out more, you've got the whole of the Waverley Borough Council website to look at, and you've got the LGA's website. I'm going to abbreviate Local Government Association to LGA because it's a bit of a mouthful, so sorry for the acronym. But we're the national voice of local councils. We lobby government on local issues so that each individual council doesn't have to go and do that. And we support councils and councillors in lots of ways. That could, for example, be producing some guidance on new planning regulations, or sharing examples of innovation on climate change for local areas to try out and implement. And we do lots of training for councillors. So you've got a list here and you can access those bits on our website, and there's support for you at all stages. So if you're thinking about finding out more, what's it all about, you'll hear this evening, and there's stuff on the websites that can help you with that too, right up to if you're the leader of a council, if you've got a particular area, topic, service that you're interested in, from biodiversity to housing to public health. Lots of things on the website. So that's the LGA website. You can start looking at that now. We also have the Be a Councillor website. That's got lots of frequently asked questions on there, such as the things that we're discussing this evening. So that might be the time commitment, the balancing of work life and councillor life, what skills you can develop, and the next steps that you need to take to become a councillor. We have the independent group office at the LGA, and as Sarah mentioned earlier, they support actually everybody who isn't in Labour, Conservative and Liberal Democrat parties. So they will support independent councillors who are on their own. They'll support groups of independents, residents associations, smaller parties or alternative parties, I think we prefer to call them. That includes the Green Party, for example. Lots of resource there. And again, you can access that now. They have their own Be a Councillor page, and they have their own campaign corners page to help you campaign if you haven't got the political party behind you. The LGA also has political group offices for Labour, Liberal Democrats and Conservatives. So you can even contact them via our website. And there's also lots of democracy organisations out there as well. You might have some locally, and we work with some nationally too. So for example, we have worked with Elect Her, we've worked with Operation Black Vote, and we've worked with 2 young people organisations called My Life, My Say and Shout Out UK. And they're great for finding out more, being in smaller groups of people, and hopefully kind of encouraging people to get involved in lots of ways in democracy, being a councillor as one of those. And if we have a look at the next slide, this is just some of the examples that actually Sarah and Damien mentioned earlier. We have conferences that you can go to. There's an e-learning platform. We have workbooks, which I think Sarah mentioned, on anything from chairing meetings. So that could be like a formal council meeting, or it could be a small community meeting that you want to really organise and kind of make progress in. Right up to making sure we've got the right mental health services in local communities, or finance for local government. There's something for everybody there. We also have something called Local Government Inform, and that is a data platform that you can use as an officer or a councillor. It's got a huge amount of data in there. And people find it very valuable to tell them what's going on in their local area, and you can benchmark it across other councils as well, so you can see what's happening in other areas and where you've got some good practice or where you can get some improvements and innovation from other councils. There's advice from officers and councillors kind of all over the place, really, as Damien and Sarah have mentioned. You'll just find that you meet people in your local area who are councillors, in the neighbouring councils, through doing work in political parties and through hopefully engaging with us at the LGA nationally. You'll find people are genuinely helpful and really want to make you successful as a councillor. So please know that there's so much out there. All of these learning and development courses we've talked about, mostly cross-party. Again, there's courses on everything from housing to economic growth to communication skills. Sarah mentioned public speaking earlier. That's something people always worry about in my experience. And there's actual courses that you can do for that. And also, if you're in a leadership position, there's particular support for people in particular positions and particular portfolio areas. There are weekender networks as well. So we have networks for women councillors, BAME councillors, LGBTQIA+ councillors, disabled councillors and young councillors. So we find these really valuable. Again, it's cross-party, you get a great network, you talk about the really important issues that you're facing and that you want to change in your local area too. So there's so much out there for you. You can have a look at all of this on the website. That's already there. So that's enough from me, and I'm going to hand over to our Waverley councillors next. I've just seen there's a question about the slides being available after the event. I presume so, and the recording of this will be available, so you can rewatch it anytime. I'll let Waverley on a Friday night. I'll let Waverley respond to that question in a moment, but I'm very happy to share my slides anyway. I'm sure everyone will be. So, question time with Waverley councillors. We have Councillor Paul Follows and we have Councillor Peter Clark. And Councillor Paul Follows is the leader of the council and portfolio holder for policy and governance, communications and emergency response, representing the Liberal Democrats. Paul was born in Devon but has lived in Surrey for most of his life and Godalming for several years. He studied at the University of Surrey in Guildford. Paul co-founded a student-led think tank with the University of Warwick on the subjects of terrorism and extremism, and has worked as a consultant researcher for planning at Surrey Heath Borough Council. Currently, he's employed at one of the world's largest security and defence companies, covering compliance, standards and ethics for Europe and North America. Paul is a town councillor and a Waverley Borough councillor and wants to build on the foundations that make Godalming a great place to live and work, and to ensure that all the voices of the town are represented. He currently lives in Cattershaw and in his spare time is a tenor with the Guildford Choral Society and an avid traveller. Thank you very much, Paul, for your time this evening.
Don't laugh, Peter, don't laugh.
Well, we have some renditions here, we'll find out. We might have time. If I chair it right, we'll have time at the end. And Councillor Peter Clark is Deputy Leader of the Council and Portfolio Holder for Business Transformation, IT, Customer Services and the Farnham Infrastructure Programme, representing the Farnham residents. Peter was educated at the High School of Glasgow and Strathclyde University. Having moved south to further his career, Peter and his family have lived in South Farnham for 37 years. Both of Peter's children were educated and brought up in Farnham. He's held directorships with EU and UK-based companies, and in recent years has worked for a local family business. Since retiring, Peter has had the time to pursue his great loves of gardening, travel and music. Peter is a member of the Farnham Society, promoting the interests of Farnham and its residents. However, as a borough councillor, he is committed to working tirelessly to promote the interests of Waverley as a whole. And we talked about earlier about councillors being embedded in the local community, and it's very clear from your biographies that that is exactly what you two are here to do. So thank you so much. We have some questions to set to you first, and then hopefully there'll be some more questions from the audience too. Paul, I'll come to you first then. We'd love to know, what do you love and enjoy about being a councillor in Waverley?
Oh, well, there's lots of things. I'm listening to the two other councillors at the beginning of the call and seeing, you know, some scary similarities when it comes to how and why we got involved into these sorts of things. But ultimately, because it's about, you care about people, you care about the local community, and it's wanting to do something different. And so, you know, what do I like about being a councillor? I like that we can really engage with our community. I mean, I think that we are, as you say, embedded in our community. And as we're talking more about Waverley in this section, I mean, Waverley is a bit of an abstract for most residents of Waverley. You tend to come from Godalming and Farnham and Cranley and Hazelmere and all points in between rather than Waverley. So there's a lot of balancing between the local and the borough needs. So I really love being able to engage with residents and about what we can actually do on the ground. I have the pleasure of also being a county councillor in opposition at county, but also leader of a town council as well. And the things that you can get done if you put your mind to it are the reasons why I do this. And when you get days where you help individuals get through little problems and little issues, and sometimes small groups, and then there are days where you get large things done for whole sections of the population all in one go, and they give you very different. They remind you for very different reasons why you do this. I mean, the first thing I got involved in this originally, partly because of a planning application as well. They never go well for anybody, whatever party you come from. If you're jumping in to oppose a planning application, they rarely go well for you, and it certainly didn't for the one I got involved in. But it was also helping a single mother find the right support to help her, frankly, evade a husband that was trying to track her and her child down. And they lived in the building across from me, and I've been involved in politics on the side, and that kind of got me into the local. And then when you get to things like now, where I'm the leader of the council, it's things like in Godalming, we've started up an entire youth service from scratch because the county weren't doing it, and these are why we do these things, so we can help people. I get to say this, Virginia. I'm afraid you're on mute.
Thank you. Someone had to do it. I can't believe it's me. Thank you so much. And Peter, please let's hear the same from you. What do you enjoy about being a Waverley Borough Councillor?
Well, I started off as the local chairman of the local government review committee down our local pub, and listening to everybody say, well, if only the local council could do this, could do that. So eventually, I thought, well, probably the only way to get the local council to do something is to actually become one of them and do it from the inside. I think it's unfortunate, before I tell you what I like about being a councillor, I think it's unfortunate that there is this mist of fog of mainly engendered by the national media that portrays councillors as a bunch of idiots. Well, I found that there are one or two, but in the main, they are not. They are hardworking and they are dedicated. What I enjoy about being a councillor, similar to what Paul said, on a ward basis, your local ward that is, you can help individual residents, you can help groups. My biggest pleasure in the 4 years I've been a councillor is helping the local trustees of our village hall get their planning application approved for a new village hall. So you can achieve things, and you can help local groups achieve things. I suppose the second thing is improving the way the council operates and the way they provide their services, and suggesting new policy which will help improve the services even further. Thank you, Virginia.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we can see some similarities across all of this, and I expect it's going to be the same for the next question as well, on the challenges that you face as a councillor in Waverley. Again, they might be very similar, they might be different. Being mindful not to be very political about the answers if we can help it. What do you find as challenging as a councillor?
Right, well, challenges. There's a few. I mean, certainly like previous speakers, I also work a full-time job. So there's the structural challenges as a councillor, because in a lot of councils, it's more county than it is Waverley, the structure of how councils work is sometimes a little bit shifted towards people who've retired. In my personal opinion, it's often not geared towards working people with children. So those are sorts of challenges that we certainly at Waverley have been trying to grasp and deal with, because actually the council should, as much as possible, try and actually represent the area that it's in my personal opinion. And a lot of the times it hasn't done. So there's those sorts of challenges, and for everybody, that's finding the time to make sure you do everything. And I know both of the previous speakers referred to that sort of time management side. That is absolutely a thing, and really, because I'm obviously the group leader here in Waverley as well, and a lot of our candidates will ask me, well, how much time a week is it to be a councillor? And that is a very difficult question to answer, because a lot of that is, well, how much time do you want to put in? How much time can you put in? I mean, usually people say, well, I've only got about 5-6 hours a week to do this. I then watch them get elected and spend half their time doing the council work as they get drawn into it and they get involved and they find they can do more. And that often changes, but it is obviously a challenge. And then you've got those more structural challenges, and I will desperately try and avoid being too political, which is that local government everywhere has had its funding reduced over the past 12 years, particularly. I think the pandemic has highlighted the absolute necessity and value of local government everywhere, but it is funding constrained across the board. Our powers to do certain things are not what you might sometimes expect. Certainly trying to, you'll get a new councillor come in and they might be wanting to do things that actually you can't. So if you're a member of a political party, or if you're independent, and go and speak to the LGA and others about what things councillors can and can't do to manage your expectations, I think, in the first instance. But there clearly are a lot of challenges. One challenge I at least think, and I'll again try not to be too political, I think we've overcome in this council. Was mentioned earlier, I think for Sarah, that she was leader of council in a NOC council, a no overall control council. Waverley in its current incarnation is a no overall control council, and 4 parties work together, and that's facilitated by a lot of local cross-party work as well. And so some of the political challenges in Waverley have at least been slightly minimised, and that is, I find, quite refreshing and quite unusual when you look at other borough councils.
Thank you, that's brilliant. And yes, on the LGA website, we do have lots of information about funding for local government, or issues with funding, and the powers and devolution is what we call about that kind of bringing down of power to local areas from central government. So there's lots of interesting stuff on that website as well. So thank you so much, Paul. That's really brought it to life for us in Waverley. And Peter, the same question to you, please. What challenges do you find as a councillor?
Well, I could summarise them in 2 words: central government and the planning system. Firstly, central government. You don't realise until you become a councillor how much of local government is actually controlled by central government. I say controlled because they're not really controlling it on a day-to-day basis, because, as Paul said, they give us they reduce the financial support year on year, and we don't realise what it's going to be until a couple of weeks before we do our own budgets, so we can't plan ahead. The planning system, well, I think we could talk all night about the planning system. Some say it's not fit for purpose, but the good thing is that local planning authorities like Waverley and other boroughs have their planning committees. So there is the defence, if you like, against the unscrupulous developers, where if you want to become a member of a planning committee, you can make a difference. You do have to bone up on your planning regulations, but it's worthwhile, because that is probably, I would suggest, why certainly many of our councillors became councillors in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Planning comes up all the time. Every Be a Councillor session that we do, it does come up all the time. And again, lots of support out there. And it's interesting hearing from both of you about that the constraints that we're dealing with in local government versus the impact that you can have, and the steep learning curve as well versus the reward that you can have in the rewarding nature of the work you're doing as well. So there are challenges in local government, and I think I'm hoping everyone here agrees that most councillors would say it's worth wading through the challenges for the impacts that you can make and the changes that you can make eventually, even though some of them might take quite a while to be able to get through. And finally, before we open for questions, so everyone in the audience, please do think of any questions that you would like to ask. We've actually got a really decent amount of time left. So if you have questions for Paul and Peter, we'll take those first. But actually, if you have questions for Sarah, Damien, or any of us, please do think and we will come to you. So pieces of advice that you would love to share with people. Paul, what piece of advice would you give to your past self as a new councillor?
There's a couple. Don't expect to walk in and know the answer to everything, and don't be worried that you don't. Because I mean, when I was elected, I was a backbencher, literally the only Liberal Democrat by myself, and this was before Peter's party had more than a few as well, and there were not very many of us. And we went from one cycle where I literally just joined the council and had never been in local government at all, and so was learning some of it, and then within 18 months we were in control of the council. So I went from literally knowing nothing about local government to having to know everything about it, and punishing myself, I think, for not knowing everything immediately. And at least one of you has in this presentation articulated something that I would stress to every new councillor, wherever they are, which is there are no stupid questions. Do not be afraid to ask those questions. And, you know, don't listen to anybody who says they know everything about it, because I've seen people who've been councillors for 35 years who could definitely do with going to some training. So you should definitely don't feel bad about not knowing, and don't feel stupid for asking the question, because there'll be probably 20 other people wishing they'd asked if you don't. So that's the advice I'd give myself.
Fantastic advice. So thank you so much. And Peter, what would your advice be?
2 words: life balance. I personally think that if you want to find out how local government works, join as many committees as you are able. But at the same time, leave some space for yourself and for your family. Look at the following week that's coming up, look at the meetings you've got scheduled, and then block off some time. I block off some time for Mrs. Clark, and then we go for lunch and we talk about the council. But the door is always open for those who want to contribute.
Thank you very much. Really, really helpful advice. And we're so glad to have you all here this evening. It's been really inspiring and very helpful on a practical level as well. So thank you very much. Let's see, I just did see a question in the question and answer section, which I know Tom has given a holding response of yes, big issues. Give me a sec. So this is an interesting one. Can you make changes with safeguarding issues and mental health problems? I won't answer this question. I'll let Tom answer that, because it's a specific area, although Paul maybe has put your hand up.
I mean, those two particular matters are usually within the realm of county councils in areas like this. So in this particular instance, Surrey County Council will be responsible for those things rather than Waverley Borough Council.
Thank you so much. That's exactly what I was just going to mention, is that actually there's a lot of misunderstanding, not for anyone's fault, because local government and national government is very confusing. But yeah, if you're in a 2-tier area or a 3-tier area, different councils will be responsible for different things. So parish and town councils, borough, district councils and county councils, and that's one of the things to be able to navigate in local government. Again, you can read up some of that. One of the easiest ways to do it really is look on both websites, the Surrey County Council website and Waverley Borough Council website. Have a look at the A to Z kind of drop downs and see what differences there are. You'll see education, you'll see highways, and that kind of thing comes up at different levels. And we do know councillors who get elected on issues that they don't realise are in different tiers. So it's actually quite useful knowing what tiers you're really passionate about and whether you're in the right place to be able to affect that change. You'll always be able to make an impact through different forms of power and relationships across boundaries, but actually it's really important to know who does what in councils, and it's not necessarily that easy for us. Peter, please come in as well. Oh, sorry, I thought you had your hand up, Peter, sorry. Any other questions on here? We've got a question about EHCP, which is an acronym that I know and I've forgotten.
Education.
Yeah.
It is again a county matter.
County.
So could I just answer that and the one underneath, which I think relates to the same point, that you can always help direct people to the right place. One of the main things that every council ends up doing, particularly in an area where it's multiple tiers like this, is signposting to the other areas. And as Virginia highlighted, we do a lot of work with other authorities to achieve certain things. So whether you're just a town councillor, a parish councillor, a borough councillor, a county councillor, or all three, like some people often end up being, you can wade into these issues, certainly on behalf of your residents. They're not going to tell you to go away because you're not the right councillor if you go and engage with the county council, at least they should not. So there's a lot of signposting going on, but you do have a right to get involved in these things. Obviously up to a point when it comes to safeguarding matters. I probably should just stress that too.
Thank you very much. And actually, as a councillor, you will start collecting, almost tallying up how many times you get asked the same thing. So you will find that maybe there's a way to change something on a website to explain where the signposting is, who to contact, or if it's a policy type issue, if you're getting the same question over and over again, that might mean there's actually a policy issue somewhere down the line, whether it's in your council or a different tier. There's another question in there, which is brilliant. I'll come to it in a sec. But Peter, you have your hand up, so I'll come to you first and then Damien.
Well, it actually is about the other question that I read, and that is, the question was, do you get beaten up sometimes because you're using local government position as a stepping stone to becoming an MP? Well, I think the answer to that is you do not have to be a member of a political party to become a councillor. I'm a member of the Farnham Residents Group, and okay, we are registered with the Electoral Commission, so we are classed as a party. But in fact, we're all a group of individuals under one umbrella. So you do not have to be associated with a political party. Thank you.
Thank you. And Damien?
It was just to come in on the casework, and I, as you mentioned earlier, I am in an area where there is a borough council and a county council, and I am both a county council and a borough council, so I'm in a unique position. I think Paul mentioned he was in that position where you can straddle two different councils' issues. But I would say one reflection in the time I've been a councillor is the nature of some of the casework has changed in that time. With the advent of a lot of online reporting, you know, Fix My Street, you get probably a lot less of the smaller lights out, bins empty or full, and probably you start to get a little bit more about those things where they may have tried different doors and been passed from one place to another. So a lot of the time your thing is hand holding, and it might not be all around what your council's responsibilities are. It's about that person feeling that you're doing your best to help them find where they need to go, because it is a complex sometimes. Many times it doesn't even involve the council. It could be the electricity company or the water company, or it could be that private landlord. There's so many different things, but I suppose the main thing in all of that when you're helping people is just that people realise you're there for them, even if that is just saying, actually, you probably better go to your county council about this, or let's sit down, let's work out the best thing, or CAB, Citizens Advice Bureau might be the thing. But that's probably just a reflection on that things have changed. So maybe, oh well, I was going to jinx it then and say the volume might have reduced, but what you deal with tends to take a little bit longer. That's generally my experience, and it may not be the same in Waverley, but I do think there are some longer term trends there. And just because it was mentioned about that you saw the question about national and local politics, all politics is local. So whatever's happening in Westminster, people will talk to you in the local streets, but at the end of the day, as evidenced by people having independent councillors, people that have no parties, often people are voting for the person. You've heard from a lot of the speakers today, it's about that connection with your councillor. It's about that person gets me, gets my street, gets my town. So actually, even if you're in a political party where there's things happening at national level, it's still about the local area. It's still about what you do often. But sometimes there are storms that we get swept up in as well, just to be frank.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody. And I can see another question here which says, how do you make an impact on national matters, for example, business rates, which is an interesting one. Anybody like to answer?
Yes,
that?
please. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, going back to one of the other points you made, so central, depending on which residents you're talking to, either there is government with no distinction between local or national, or there's national and local with local government and no distinction. And a lot of the time you will find residents very strongly believe something to be true, that when you get into local government, even if you've had some background in any politics, you find against the received wisdom is not true. So, for example, I was quite surprised to find borough councils not only have absolutely nothing to do with setting business rates, but they keep almost none of them too. In Waverley's case, it's about 5 pence in the pound. So one of the, as a sort of national extension of the sort of signposting I was talking about with other local authorities, we also do write quite a lot of letters to government ministers, which, without going too political, has been a little bit of a challenge over the course of the last year with the numbers of swapping rounds of ministers. So we do spend a little bit of time lobbying government. Now, Waverley has 2 MPs because part of Waverley is Cranley and the east of the borough is in Guildford constituency. So we obviously have 2 MPs that represent the area as well. So we do quite a lot of direct lobbying with those 2 MPs. And we also do some direct lobbying with particular ministers on particular things. And you will often find that there is the last sections of motions put up at council will usually be to engage with the local MPs and or the relevant minister as part of that. And the executive of the council will frequently engage with the MPs and with ministers on matters of note. Local government funding is usually one of those. Business rates is definitely another because of the way that they work. But there are lots of those sort of national issues that we try to engage on relatively regularly. There's no way I can answer without straying too politically about how successful we are in that matter. But that's probably where I'll end and hand over to Peter and Sarah.
Thank you very much. And actually, that's one of the things that people will find on the LGA website as well, is that I mentioned earlier that the LGA lobbies government on behalf of councils, but actually that has to be on a consensus basis. So we can only do so much to make sure everyone of all tiers of councils agree to a certain extent, and of all parties and independents agree to a certain extent. So we take a lot to government. Paul's mentioned those 2 really important areas, and adult social care is a huge one as well, for example, again at a county level, but you have support of the LGA for that to some extent as well, so that's really useful. Thank you, Paul. Sarah, you had your hand up first, please.
Yes, well, I mean, being an independent councillor, you know, I wasn't involved in any national politics, and I have to say, in my area, lobbying the MP never got us anywhere. Don't bother with that. But what I have done is engaged with the LGA and also the district council network. So as my role as leader, I was then on LGA boards and I was on the district council network, which I found to be an amazing way to influence policy. So you can be on there as a leader, but you can get involved in other ways. And what you have there is working groups that are feeding into national policy. So if you really want to impact on that, you can get there because you get involved in your LGA group. You then get onto boards which feed through to policy, which is then sent to national government. So like I say, one morning I was cleaning, you know, for old people. In the afternoon, I'm speaking to the Parliamentary Select Committee about the Environment Bill, which has gone into their report, and I'm there quoted. So I kind of think if you want to influence national policy, you can. There's no reason, you know, I've been there and I've been involved in it, and especially on climate change. And I chaired a district council network conference thing on climate change and biodiversity. So I think it's all there and it's all accessible. So if you want to get involved nationally, you know, even with business rates, the LGA and the DCN and all of that, that is the way to go. Or, you know, maybe it's just our MP, there's no point lobbying, but that is the way I found I actually have influenced national policy. So it can be done.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. And Peter.
Well, we do lobby our local MPs. We also try and educate them as well, because some of them are blissfully unaware of how local government actually works. The other way we can influence things is from time to time, when central government is introducing new policy, they do put it out to consultation, and some councils respond to that kind of consultation, others don't. But the more you respond and again educate, perhaps the more you will be listened to.
Thank you. Yes, ongoing process between communication and just keeping going, really. I've got another question, actually. This is for Sarah. And the question is, as a woman, have you felt that there have been any barriers for you to overcome?
I'll be honest and I'll go, yes, absolutely. You know, I was recently at an LGA peer conference, and I happened to make a comment about, I do a lot of peer reviews as well for councils, and somebody made, I can't remember the wording, but it was some comment about, oh, well, women do that. And you're sitting there thinking, it's 2022, seriously, we're still doing this? So yes, in all honesty, it is still there. There is still a barrier. You know, there's a lot less women in local politics than men. So it is something you deal with a lot and deal with on a daily basis. But having said that, I still got to be leader of the council. I got to do all the things I did. So it might not be so easy, and it can be quite challenging. And I have pulled people up in my own council for saying things that I felt weren't appropriate and perhaps weren't so great. And people seem to stop doing that now, because, you know, if you ask questions in the middle of a full council, which they perhaps didn't like, people tend to think about things before they say them. So I think it is about always challenging it. But yes, it is difficult. But they do run a lot of courses for women, women-only councillors at the LGA, or minority group councillors at the LGA. So I think it's about accessing the support networks that are there, and how you deal with it. So I'm quite sure the councillors in Malvern would go, oh yeah, that's Sarah, here she goes. But I will challenge it if I think it's inappropriate. So yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, we do have these challenges, I suppose, not unlike other sectors, and it's a global issue, underrepresentation, or the isms that you get, sexism, racism in different places. So they are challenges that we deal with. And again, all of the support that there is really useful for councillors on those more kind of personal issues to be able to deal with. That resilience and being able to access support when you need it is really important. So please ask if you have any questions on that. And the more you talk to other councillors about that, the more kind of strategies there are in place. And you should be able to talk to your council about any issues too. You have the code of conduct, you have the constitution. So we don't want to be seeing any of those behaviours, actually. And thank you for calling them out when they happen. I don't have any other questions in the chat or Q&A. So unless anybody from Waverley stops me, I will say thank you very much to everybody and all of our speakers from me. I'm going to hand back over to Tom Horwood, but thank you so much, everybody.
Virginia, thank you so much for facilitating this evening. It's been really helpful, really interesting as well, and actually really inspiring to hear from councillors, from those of you who are actually doing it. I've been in local government for 20 years, and I'm always in awe of councillors and people who offer themselves for election and are just really driven by trying to improve your local places. It's that's what it's all about. I don't have a lot to sum up, but I will just a couple of reflections that I was noting as I was listening to the conversation. I was really struck by Sarah's comment about how it takes 12 months, because that's often what I've said to new councillors. I've told them not to be surprised and don't worry if it takes about 12 months, because you need to get through, we are quite cyclical. It needs to get through a sort of 1 year cycle where you've seen things come and go. You've gone through a budget setting process, a council tax setting process, and those sorts of things. And then you start to feel a bit more familiar, but there will be surprises in that first 12 months. I think the other thing is really about support. So please do get in touch as you're thinking about this, both in terms of anything that's on your mind that you've heard today, and also the practicalities of running for election. The elections team is here to help you doing that, and that's regardless of whether you're in a party or not, or which party you're in, and all the rest of it. That's what we're here to do, to to help you get through that process. So any questions you have, my tip would be don't leave them too late if you're going through the electoral cycle, because there are some very hard deadlines. And it does mean if you've got the form wrong, suddenly we might have to say sorry. So get in touch early, run drafts past the elections team, talk to us about filling stuff in, particularly if you are running as an independent, because then you're less likely to have the support from a party machine that can sometimes help with the process. And also, if you do become elected, we're here to help. We've heard quite a bit about some of the pressures. Also, I think a lot about the satisfaction that being a local councillor provides. There's always a case in a council that has, well, we'll have 50 councillors next May. And then there's always 1 or 2 councillors who, during a 4-year term of office, there will be things that happen, and fellow councillors will help. Officers are here to help. There's always light at the end of whatever tunnel that life throws at you. We also have an employee assistance programme that we've extended to councillors as well. So there is support, and never be afraid to ask for it. So I hope that's really whetted your appetite a little, answered some of the questions you may have. Feel free to come along on the 10th of February at the Wilfred Noyes Centre in Godalming if you'd like to, or to be in touch. And other than that, I think it's really just down to me to close it. Thank you very much for all of those who've spoken, particularly to Damien and Sarah, who've given up their time to virtually visit us in Surrey. Thank you so much for doing that. Really great to meet you and hear from you. So I think really it's now to close the evening's event, and hopefully look forward to seeing some of you either on the 10th or possibly even on the evening of the count. So all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Night all.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Bye.